So what we did is we've got this track they built, this sled that's already been built. So we're gonna just check and see how square it's cutting. Now you can always take this data once it's kind of cut through there, that channel, throw a square in there, take another square, you can put a piece of wood in there and check it, and it looks pretty close. I mean, right now that looks pretty close, and it may be. This is built pretty well. I'm assuming that it's gonna cut pretty square. So the saw is unplugged. Always, anytime you're messing with this, make sure if you're changing the blade, if you're putting a dado on, whatever you do, unplug that saw. So I had an edger that I was working on the switch, and it was in a commercial building, and I unplugged it from the wall, and I'm working on the switch, and my guy walked by and thought he kicked it out, so he walked over and plugged it in. It was only 110 power, but it hurts. So from that point on, I usually take the cord and I'll shove it in my pocket. Now this plug is a little big because nobody's gonna pull it out of my pocket and plug it in, right? At least not with me noticing. So I would take, like, even in my shop when I'm by myself, I don't, but I still, my kids laugh at me because I'll have the cord shoved in my pocket. I'm like, what's that plugged into? I get a lot of that. But a better way to test it is gonna be through a 5-cut system. And we've got a square piece. It doesn't have to be square. I just need to start with one straight edge. Okay, I'm gonna make one cut here. Okay, where I'm gonna take off just a little bit, and I'm gonna rotate that cut piece against this fence. I'm gonna cut the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and on this one I'm gonna cut a piece and I'm gonna save it. These others are just scrap. They're just creating a new line. The difference between these two ends will tell me how square my fence is. And that is now multiplied by 4, which is basically like taking this measurement 4 pieces deep. Okay, so it's going to give you a larger variation. If you're off, you're going to see that it's off. Now, if we're off by a 64th on that, I know that's not very much over, you know, what is this, 9 inches. So over that 27 inches, right?
Turns into something.
Yeah, it can get big. And I want to keep all my variations as slight as possible, especially when we start cutting like some of these miters. We're going to have some, I think we're just doing on this one, we're doing some herringbone, but it still needs to be as accurate as possible. Okay, and when you build these, like I said before, this will last you forever. It'll last a long, long time. How high do I want this blade?
4 inches. You take it right to the stop, right?
Right? Here, if I have an accident and I do cut myself, at least I'm not cutting myself very deep and hopefully not everything off, right? So here I've got my depth set. All I need to do is just cut that little bit off, and then I'm gonna rotate it. Okay, so now we're going to measure the difference on these two ends. It's not off by much. So this fence isn't square. Okay, so to square up this fence, I marked this side. Okay, so that tells me this top angle is too shallow. Okay, so what do I need to do with this?
You gotta swing the whole fence.
I got to swing the whole fence in. Okay, so that would mean I would take and put a stop here by probably about like this much of a gap. Okay, I'm going to do 1/4 of what this is, and I'm going to clamp this on. I'm going to move this, I'll unscrew the fence. I would rotate this fence to where it's that square, re-secure it to my base, and then I would recut and try it again. Okay, and you can bring that around to where this is going to be the same size on both ends. So you can see how if we're cutting a single piece that's only this wide, or that depth right there, not a big deal, because it's off by just such a small amount, but we're off by this much times 4. That's how far it's off. So that's like 9 inches, 9 inches times 4, 36 inches, we're off a 1/16 of an inch, or almost an 1/8. So it's not very much, but if we're looking at doing 4 pieces here that we're trying to cut all at once, that could be quite a bit. So what we're going to do instead, for 2 reasons. One, if you guys saw while I was cutting, some of these pieces would get up there. What happens if I get a piece right there? Okay, there's no clearance channel, right? We talked about that. So I'm actually going to cut a piece that's square. I'm going to throw a couple of screws in here. Okay, so we can adjust this and make it square, and then I'll put a piece against it that we can rest, and it'll have a clearance channel. Then we'll screw it in once we get it square. We'll screw it in place here. And we'll use the screws just because it's easier to do than this. And once you get it square, then you screw it down in and it's done. Okay, and those screws are really easy to adjust. I don't have to unscrew anything from the bottom. I just move this piece away. I can adjust it, put it back, make my cuts again, and keep going till I get it right. And then I can screw it down and attach it to the board. And then it's good forever. Miter saw, same thing. We're looking at 2 different angles for square. I'm looking for vertical, okay, and I'm also looking for my 90, making sure that it's cutting nice and square and we'll have to check that. These saws are pretty accurate, but don't just trust a 40 or a 30 as a 30. You need to check it.